Welcome everyone to this another episode of Ancient History of Bharat. One thing that I would like to make it clear in the very beginning of this episode is all of this is new to me as well. Okay, before I present to you any of the chapters in this book, I too am reading this book for the very first time. It's not that I've already gone through this book and then I am coming in front of the camera and discussing what has been mentioned in this book. All right, so even me myself is getting acquainted with the information that is given in this book. All right, that having said, I don't know why was it important for me to mention that, but just in the interest of honesty, I would just like to put it out there. Okay, it's not that I have already gone through all the chapters of this book and then I'm coming in front of the camera and narrating the way I want to and manipulating things the way I want to know. So here is what goes on behind the camera. Before I come in front of the camera with the chapters, I make sure that I have referred to sufficient part of the book for me to make a video. So it goes on a daily basis. First I'll refer to the chapters, and once I'm done, I will come in front of the camera. So I'll stop the reading over there, come in front of the camera, upload it over the YouTube, and then again start reading. So when I will have covered the sufficient amount, then again I will come in front of the camera. So that is the how the rolling goes. All right. Today we are going to discuss something that has fancied the imagination of most of the citizens of Bharat. Okay, the great war of the Bharatas that we like to call as Mahabharat. Okay. Now there is significant amount of information that R.C. Majumdar includes in this book, and I'm sure this is again a dilute version of the information that is already given in the Puranas and the Brahmanas. Okay, but again, for the agenda of this video, for the scope of this video, we'll only limit our discussion to the details that are of utmost importance for us to correct the narrative that we were taught in our high schools, or rather in school history or in our education system. All right, so you understand what I mean when I say to correct the narrative, meaning largely what the mass of the population has been led to believe. All right, now in the very beginning, if you really believe that the great war of the Bharatas was nothing but fiction and that's all there is, it was absolute fiction, then I would tend to disagree with you sharply. Okay, because intellectual honesty is something that goes both ways. All right, you cannot hold on to the belief that the Christian belief of resurrection from the dead and the Islamic belief of flying horses and the heavenly book being revealed to somebody, if you believe that to be absolute truth, how come you do not extend the same courtesy to the Aryan scriptures? Okay, so just to give you a brief idea about the difference in the time scales, Christianity started as a movement within Judaism in the 1st century. Okay, so just to give you a brief idea about the time scale, when exactly was 1st century? Okay, so right now currently is 2024. If you rewind the clock back 2024 years, you will reach a point that will be 0. Okay, that somewhere close to that and somewhere towards the right of that will be the 1st century. The great war of the Bharatas, that is the Bharata tribe that we are going to discuss in this video, is supposed to have taken place in 1400 BC. Okay, so after reaching that point 0, after rewinding the clock back 2024 years, you still need to rewind the clock to go back towards the negative somewhere close to 1400 years, and then you will reach the age where the great war of the Bharatas took place. Okay, so you cannot comprehend things based on the parameters that were decided by monotheistic traditions that came up at least a millennia and half a century later, after the great war of the Bharatas. Okay, so you cannot seek to define these things by the definitions that have come out of the monotheistic traditions, and you cannot claim to completely comprehend all of these things. I see all across YouTube's and all other social media platforms, there are people who will seek to nullify and negate the principles of the Aryan faith by using the tools and equipments that are provided by the monotheistic traditions. That is something that will be gross injustice and, to say the very least, unempathetic towards the pagans. Okay, so let us discuss the great war of the Bharatas. Okay, it starts off from page number 304. All the young Kuru princes received training in arms from Kripa and Drona, where Ashwathama and Karna were their study mates. Okay, so all the young princes. Remember, in our previous video, we have established that Kuru as a term, Kuru was an individual who was a extremely righteous ruler. He expanded the frontiers of the Aryan state to far and beyond. All right, to commemorate his legacy, okay, from his death onwards, that lineage was known by the name of Kauravas to commemorate the Kuru ruler. Okay, I have mentioned this holy land has given birth to many rulers and conquerors who, far, I would say, I'm not getting the right word right now, but who have shifted the frontiers of the Aryan state far beyond of what King Rama could do. Okay, it is only due to his exceptional and immaculate character that we remember Ram, but there have been numerous kings who have far outshadowed Ram in the terms of expanding the frontiers of Aryanhood. Okay, one such king was Kuru, and the field where this great battle of the Bharatas took place, that field itself is named after the king Kuru. Okay, so Kuru himself wasn't a bad king. It was his the further people in his lineage who were. Okay, we'll cover that sufficiently in the upcoming parts of this video. But yes, it is the further people, individuals in his lineage who will divide themselves into Pandavas and Kauravas. Okay. So all the young Kuru princes received training in the arms from Kripa and Drona, where Ashwathama and Karna were their study mates. So everyone studied at the abode of the Kripa and the Drona. Drona, he was a very learned sage and a priest. He is supposed to have been well versed in the arts of war, in the arts of archery and weaponry. All right. On completion of their training, Drona demanded as his fees the defeat and capture of Panchala king Drupada, who had insulted him as his co-student. Okay. Now there is also some background to why exactly, what exactly did Dronacharya demand in return for him having imparted the knowledge that he had acquired through his penance. Okay. So understand this from the first principles. Okay, you might have come across this saying in current English that there is no such thing as free lunch. Okay, so Dronacharya, he was imparting this knowledge that he himself had acquired through painful penance. He wasn't exactly going to give away all these things free of cost. Okay, and we cannot operate under the assumptions that these Kuru princes were unaware of such a tradition where Guru, the teacher, demands something in return for having imparted the knowledge that he has given. Okay, now here is where I would say the genesis of the battle and the genesis of the struggle between or the internal struggle between the Kauravas starts. Okay, now after finishing of their course with Dronacharya, what did Dronacharya expect the Kuru princess to do in return? He expected that the training that they had gained from Dronacharya, they should use that training to defeat King Drupada of the Panchal kingdom. Now, why exactly did Dronacharya want the Drupada king of the Panchalas defeated? Okay, so that would again have some, background that when Drona himself was a student, so Drona and Drupad were classmates. All right, and it is said that Drupada had insulted Dronacharya when they both were students. And to seek revenge and seek vengeance for the insult that was afforded to Dronacharya at the hands of Drupada is something that motivated him to train the Kauravas. Okay. So, yes, like I said, everything happens for a reason. If you believe in coincidences, okay, you are more likely a useful idiot. So never believe in coincidences, always seek to rationalize things. And this was the rationale behind Drona seeking vengeance on Drupada. So what happened was, the Kuru princes, after, they could not deny Dronacharya, because then since they had gained that training, and in a way it was also a test, okay, by Dronacharya, that let's see what my students can accomplish based on the training that he had provided them with. All right. So the Kuru princes marched against Drupada and vanquished him. Drona made peace with Drupada by leaving South Panchala to him. So the Kuru princes managed to siege and subjugate the Panchal kingdom. Okay. Now the southern part of that kingdom was left to Drupada. Okay, and the northern part was taken over by Dronacharya. All right. Now, what was happened was, now, like I have mentioned, there were two people, Dhritarashtra and Pandu. The Pandavas were the lineages of the Pandu, and the Kauravas were the lineages of Dhritarashtra. Okay. Now, I would say there is no significant clarity over here, but I would be so daring to come up with this speculation that Dronacharya had some or what affinity towards the Pandavas because of their commitment towards the knowledge and erudition of Dronacharya himself. Okay, because you might have experienced this once or sometime or the other, that if there is a student, okay, and that student is very well committed to the knowledge of the teacher also grows some or the other fondness or affinity towards that student. Okay, clearly Arjuna was the favorite pupil and disciple of Dronacharya, so there was some degree of affinity towards Pandavas that Dronacharya had, and this was somewhat a source of envy for the Kauravas or the descendants of the Dhritarashtra. Okay. Now keep in mind, earlier there was no clear distinction between Pandavas and the Kauravas. All of them belonged to the same lineage that was the Kurus. Okay, it was only after when there was significant distance between the descendants of the Pandu and the descendants of Dhritarashtra, that they themselves were going outside, conquering kingdoms, they were expanding the borders, and they were enjoying huge successes when it came to overtaking the kingdoms. Okay, and this was the source of envy for the descendants of Dhritarashtra, who later come to be known as Kauravas. Okay. Okay, next on comes the Swayamvara. Okay. They came to Kampilya, and on Arjuna successful accomplishing the feat imposed as a test in the Swayamvar of the Princess Draupadi of Panchal, daughter of King Drupada, she became the common wife of the 5 Pandava brothers. Okay. Now this is also a big famous folk tale how did Arjun manage to overcome the hurdles that were put forth in front of him during the Swayamvar that those people were participating in. Okay, now Arjuna, he manages to triumphantly overcome these obstacles. There are some pretty much different folklores regarding it, some bow and arrow challenge and all that. That indeed is true. I'm not denying the fact, but yes, Arjuna, he manages to overcome that triumphantly, and Draupadi comes on board as a wife of all the five Pandavas. Okay, this was again something that added and accentuated the envy that the Kauravas were already harboring. Okay, because this was no lesser feat that the Pandavas had managed to achieve. Because, like I said, the bow that Arjuna manages to you know the capability that he displayed over there was no lesser feat. The kingdoms all, because people will talk whenever you accomplish something that is of significance, people will definitely talk. Okay, so the words were spreading. There were people who were heaping praises on the Pandavas and how rightful and righteous rulers they were, and this was a source of envy. Okay, now they were already harboring some envy based on the fact that the descendants of Pandu, they were successfully able to expand the frontiers of their state. Okay, so it was piling up, the envy that the Kauravas were harboring over the Pandavas. They were piling up. Okay, the Pandavas founded Indraprastha and made it their capital. This is where, after founding of the capital, this is where now there is going to be a clear distinction between the descendants of Pandu, who later come to be known as Pandavas, and descendants of Dhritarashtra, who later come to be known as the Kauravas. Okay, after finding of the capital by the Pandavas, that was known by the name Indraprastha, now comes the clear distinction. Earlier, they belonged to the same lineage. Okay, owing to the Pandavas founded Indraprastha and made it their capital. Owing to breach of a self-imposed rule, Arjuna went on a voluntary pilgrimage for 12 years, during which he contracted marital alliance with Chitrangada, princess of Manipur, and Subhadra, the Yadava princess, sister of Krishna. Okay, after finding Indraprastha and making it the capital, Arjuna apparently had taken a vow or a rule. Okay, he goes on to the forest in the form of pilgrimage for 12 years. And during this pilgrimage, his sojourn towards the woods, okay, he makes two marital alliances. Number one is Chitrangada. She was a princess who hails from Manipur. Okay, this makes you want to wonder this frequent narrative of the northeastern part of Bharat, somewhat divorced from the cultural traditions of the mainland Bharat, such as that is not the case. Okay, just because we don't know something, just because there is an absence of evidence, that does not say that there was no evidence in the first place. Okay, so yes, and there is one more. Arjuna also marries Subhadra. She was the Yadava princess, and she was also the sister of Krishna. So these are the marital alliance. Okay. Now, since they had established their own capital, there were certain rituals that they had to undertake. One of those rituals was Rajasuya sacrifice. There are some guidelines. Whenever you start a new capital, whenever you start a new kingdom, there are certain sacrifices that you are supposed to make. And after having done those sacrifices, there are also some steps or some measures that you need to take. And one of those measures is, preliminary requirement was, the other four Pandava brothers set out on conquering the whole earth. Okay. King Jarasangh of Magad was their greatest opponent and challenger. And under the advice and guidance of Krishna, Bhima killed Jarasangh in a duel. Jarasangh's son Sahadev was installed on the Magad throne, and he became an ally of the Pandavas. Okay, this is something that uh, e- even I am not able to reason it out well. Okay, there are also practices way before. One of the examples is the epic Ramayana as well. When Ram defeated Ravana, why exactly set up Vibhishan on that place? Why not just take it as a kingdom and rule over there? Okay, merge it with Ayodhya and make it into an entire large political body. Okay, why return it to the same lineage that Ram had defeated? The same example is also seen in the case of Jarasangh as well. Bhima, one of the Pandavas, defeats Jarasangh, and after defeating him, he restores the seat or the throne of Magad to Sahadev. That was the son of Jarasangh. Why not just take it over? Why not just expand the frontiers? There is something I'm sure there is definitely some explanation out there. It's just I don't know it right now. But while watching this video, if you are aware and there is some simple explanation for this, you can comment it. So there are other viewers who don't know or is not in the possession of that knowledge can know. Feel free to comment. Okay. So it was after the Rajasuya when Duryodhan was inspecting Sabha or the assembly hall built by Maya that the seeds of Bharata war were deeply sown. The rapid rise of the Pandavas was an eyesore to the Kauravas. Okay. Now during this Rajasuya sacrifice, obviously they belonged to the a similar mothership of the lineages, although they might have split into two different lineages from this point forwards, and hence they were undertaking the Rajasuya sacrifice. But that does not erase the fact that the common mothership of both the lineages was one, that is the Kurus. So during this Rajasuya sacrifice, they had also invited the Kauravas. All right, and it is during this visit that the famous folk tale of Duryodhan getting lost in the palace of Maya. Okay, this is a very popular and famous folk tale that if you don't know, you can simply just Google it. You will come forth with it. But yes, this is where Duryodhan feels insulted, and this is where the seeds and the germs of the great war of the Bharatas are sown. The seeds are sown. Okay. Now here is something that is I'm not really sure if this is this can be verified or not, but R.C. Majumdar writes on page number 305. Okay. Now this is again building upon the envy and the jealousy that already the Kauravas were harboring, and on top of that they were visiting Rajasuya sacrifice, and even on top of that Duryodhana was insulted. Okay, so now something had to be done. All right, now what was done? Let's see. Taking advantage of the Kshatriya code of conduct that one should not refuse when invited for a duel or for a gambling match. Is that so? Okay, is there a Kshatriya code where if somebody invites you to a duel or a gambling match, you cannot refuse? All right, I cannot verify this, but if there is somebody who is viewing this and at the time of viewing, if you can verify it and vouch for it, you can comment on this video. But let's assume under the assumption that there is indeed something called as the Kshatriya code of conduct. And if somebody challenges you to a duel or a gambling match, you cannot deny, pursuing to that code. So the same thing happens. Duryodhana challenges Yudhishthir for a game of dice, in which the latter staked everything, including Draupadi, and lost. All right. Since, according to or adhering to the Kshatriya code of conduct, Yudhishthir could not refuse to the challenge of a game of dice. All right. I'm wondering what is the rationale for such a code? Okay. Why can't a person refuse? Okay, I don't want to play or I don't want to fight with you. Because let's say, for example, if somebody is challenging to a duel, all right, they are doing it because either number one is they are insecure that the other, if let's say if I am challenging the other person according to that code, kshatriya code of conduct, and the other person is refuses, what would happen? Why can't the other person refuse? That, I would say, we don't have enough bricks to build this wall of reason, as it to reason out why exactly the other person cannot refuse. But that is something for posterity to judge. If there is sufficient evidence with you, you can bring it forward and we can take that conversation forward. But yes, Yudhishthir, he could not refuse. And let's see what happens. So they lose it, they lose everything, including Draupadi. Okay, this is where there is first appearance of Krishna in Mahabharata, the episode of Draupadi. All right. Now, since they had lost everything, they had to, I would say, go and go to the forests for 12 years. And there was also a hidden term and condition as well. At the end of those 12 years, you'll also have to spend 1 year incognito, meaning nobody would know that these exactly are the Pandavas who once ruled over the capital of Indraprasth. Okay. Now there is a record of where exactly did they spend this 1 year incognito. That is Matsya country. Now Matsya country was, if you had to imagine the territory of the Matsya country, you can imagine the areas of the current day Rajasthan. Okay. They were there. They were helped by Matsya king Virata against the attack of Kauravas. Virata's daughter Uttara was married to Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna. So while I would say they were spending their excommunication in incognito, there was some marital alliance, matrimonial alliance between Abhimanyu, who was the son of Arjuna. And since they all were staying over there, the king of Matsya country, who goes by the name of Virat, they both were married. Okay. Now there is something interesting that I discovered while reading this book. Okay, it might also come as interesting to you as well. It is written on page number 306 of this book. Krishna himself sided with the Pandavas, but his forces fought on the side of the Kauravas. How do you think this is possible? Imagine there is a king, there is a kingdom. That king would have an army. Okay. Now the king himself fights on one side, and the army of that king fights on the other side. Okay. How do you reason this out? How do you make sense of this? There has to be some reason why Krishna made sure that his army fights on the other side. He himself fights on the side opposite to it. What was the reason behind it? Okay. If you are in knowledge of a certain folklore or a folk tale that explains this duality that Krishna possessed, you can comment on this video. But there has to be some reasonable explanation for this. Okay. Now, one thing that you need to note here as well, this, how would you explain this struggle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas? Was it an internal struggle? I would say yes. Was it a personal struggle? I would say yes. Okay. Since it was the humiliation and embarrassment that was meted out to the common wife of the Pandavas, that was Draupadi, this was the motivation behind the seeking of revenge that motivated the Pandavas, to participate in that war. Keep in mind, there were also efforts made from the side of Pandavas to avoid the war in the first place, but that is no reason to consider that, to negate that indeed they were motivated by revenge. There has to be some element of revenge involved in the, Pandavas going ahead with this war. Okay, so you cannot be so naive to assume that the Pandavas themselves did not want to fight this war in the first place. I would say that would be naive to operate under that assumption. All right, so yes, now in the Puranas, there are also other kingdoms that are mentioned who participate either on the side of the Kauravas or either on the side of the Pandavas. Now, why would other kingdoms participate on either of the sides? unless there was something that they were fighting, unless there was something that they thought was worthy to fight and die for. This is something that you should think. Okay, if indeed there was no single nationhood, if indeed there was nothing that bounded us together, okay, 5,000 years ago, why exactly were other kingdoms participating in the great war of the Bharatas? There had to have been something that bound them together. Okay, now there are a list of kingdoms that are given. Okay, I'm going to read that out. Okay. Only Western Magad, ruled by Jarasang's son Sahadev, was on the Pandava side. Like we mentioned earlier, Bhima, one of the Pandavas, defeats Jarasangh and installs Sahadev, the Jarasang's son, on the throne, and hence they were fighting on the side of the Pandavas. All the rest, Eastern Magad, Videha, Anga, Vanga, Kalinga, which are under Karna, joined the Kaurava forces. All these kingdoms were fighting on the side of the Kauravas. The Kiratas under Bhagadat, ruler of Pragyajyotisha, also were under the banner of the Kauravas, so that particularly the whole east supported them. In the Madhya Desha, the rulers of Vatsa, Kasi, Chedi, Karusha, Dasarana, and Panchala figured among the supporters of the Pandavas, while Brihadbala, king of the Kosalas, went to the opposite camp. In short, broadly speaking, the Madhya Desha and Gujarat stood for the Pandavas, and the rest, which is the east, northwest, and western Bharat, opposed them. So, this is something for you to think about. They might have been their allies. Okay, that could have been true. They could have been allies, yes. But to risk considerable amount of resources, to risk your own life, to risk the welfare and the safety of your citizens, and go and fight such a dreadful battle, there has to have been a strong motivation other than simply just personal alliances to participate in this war. Again, I will leave it to your better judgment. There has to have been something more stronger than just alliance or personal preferences. Okay, now who was the commander in chief? Like somebody who takes decisions on the ground. So on the side of Pandavas, it was Drishtadyumna, and on the side of the Kauravas, it was Bhishma. Okay. Only opponents of equal birth and armed with same kind of weapons were to fight each other. None was to fight without first challenging his opponent. Okay, there were some ground rules before starting the battle. Unlike in I don't know how exactly has this phrase come into acceptance in our day-to-day lives, that is everything in fair in love and war. Okay, but 5,000 years ago there were rules even to fight. Okay, only opponents of equal birth and armed with same kind of weapons were to fight each other. Okay, so somebody who is of a specific lineage, okay, that person can only fight another person who is from a similar or at par with the lineage of his or his opponent. None to fight without first challenging his opponent. You cannot slyly attack your opponent. You will have to make announcement beforehand attacking your opponent. All right. The venerable Bhishma commanded the Kaurava forces during the first 10 days of war. So during the first 10 days, it was Bhishma who was commanding it. It was only through the arrows discharged by Arjuna against Bhishma under the cover of Shikhandi, whom Bhishma did not fight, Shikhandi being originally a woman, that on the 10th day Bhishma fell down headlong from his chariot. This is again something that has intrigued many of the readers. Okay, how did Bhishma, somebody who has vowed, to be celibate all throughout his life, and who was a fierce warrior of such a stature, how could that person have been defeated? Okay, earlier in the previous videos we have discussed that what was the stature of Bhishma. There was nobody who could have stood in front of him in a battlefield. Then how exactly was Arjun able to defeat Bhishma? Okay, there is again some manipulation over here. there was an individual who goes by the name of Shikhandi. Okay, Shikhandi was neither a man nor a woman, and according to the knowledge that was possessed by Bhishma at that time, he did not know. He was under the impression that Shikhandi was a woman, and since according to that he did not attack Shikhandi, and Arjuna managed to slyly attack Bhishma and kill him. Okay, and this is how Bhishma met his end. Next up, Drona was consecrated the next commander, and he carried on the fight till the 15th day after the fall of Bhishma, who was the next commander commander for the Kaurava forces, Drona himself. Okay, Drona was consecrated the next commander, and he carried on the fight till the 15th day. Abhimanyu was killed on the 13th day, and Ghatochka, the demon son of Bhima, on the 14th. So, if somebody is writing this, with specificities such as so and so person was killed on so and so day, okay, so I would again, stress upon this theory of, agreement is a two-way street. So, if you are willing to concede and acknowledge that yes, this is not absolutely fiction, there is some degree of truth to it as well, then I too am willing to acknowledge and submit that there is some degree of exaggeration here as well. Okay, but it cannot be just unilaterally me agreeing that this is absolutely fiction and you telling me that your stories of resurrection of the dead and flying horses is all true. Okay, all right, so next up is so Drupad and Virat were killed by Drona on the 15th day. Okay, the king Drupada, again Virat, the king of the Matsya country, they were killed by Drona. And finally that evening Drishtadyumna killed Drona. The great Dronacharya meets his end. While in deep sorrow on hearing the false news of the death of his son Ashwathama. Karna was the next commander. Now comes to the fore, the largely celebrated Karna for his... I do understand up to a certain degree why Karna as a character resonates with the masses of this country. Okay, because in the contemporary era, many of us are fighting our battles, without the support of, many people around us. Many of us are fighting multiple battles, and that too alone. Okay, and hence we find our resonance with Karna. Now, Karna was the next commander. His turn lasted only for 2 days, during which Bhima tore open Dushasan's heart or breast. Karna was killed by Arjuna. Salya became the commander on the 18th or the last day of the battle. He was killed by Yudhishthira, but by about midday, while Sahadev killed Sakuni. The entire host of the Kauravas was thus completely annihilated, and Duryodhan fled to a pond where Pandavas challenged him. So after having exhausted the list of able commanders that he had, Duryodhana, he fled to a pond. Okay, Pandavas, they readily follow him to the pond and challenge him there as well. In the club fight against Bhima, Duryodhan's thighs were smashed and he dropped down bleeding. Bhima defeats Duryodhan in a duel. Duryodhan appointed Aswathaman as the last commander, who, with the help of other two survivors from among the Kaurava heroes, that is Kripa and Kritavarman, stealthily entered into Pandava camp at night and slaughtered the surviving Pandava princes and Drishtadyumna while asleep. Okay. Now there were also some sly moves used from the Kaurava side as well. Okay. These two individuals, Kripa and Kritavarman, okay, like I said, the battle was halted during the night. You were not allowed to fight during the night, and hence, okay, they made this sly move, penetrated the Pandava camp at the night and killed some of the princes, and also killed Drishtadyumna, who was the commander of the Pandava forces. Okay. The Pandavas emerged victorious, but besides the 5 Pandava brothers, Satyaki was the sole survivor on their side. Okay. Thus, the victory, though complete, was won at a very high cost. Like the victory for the Pandavas, it came at a very high cost because at the end, there was only one survivor who goes by the name of Satyaki. The Kuru line being extinct with the death of the 100 sons of the Dhritarashtra, Yudhishthir became king of the Kurus and ruled at Hastinapur. Since the entire lineage of Dhritarashtra was wiped out, they were wiped out clean. Okay. Now there was nobody from their lineage who was left to take over the throne of Hastinapur, and hence it was Yudhishthir who had to come forward to sit on the throne because he was the eldest of the Pandavas. Okay. Hence, Yudhishthir also performs some horse sacrifice that was known as Ashwamegh because it was fashionable for kings in those times to sacrifice a horse to start a new kingdom. Whenever a king starts a new kingdom or whenever a king wants to establish his rule over kingdom, they do this horse sacrifice. Okay. On the next page, on page number 308, R.C. Majumdar writes, some years after the Bharata war, the Vrishnis and the Yadavas of Gujarat perished in fratricidal strife and Krishna died. Arjuna was sent to bring the survivors of Yadavas, but on his way back he was attacked and defeated by Abhiras. Arjuna returned to Hastinapur with Krishna's grandson Vajra and placed him at the head of the people who followed him from Dwarka. Thereafter, Yudhishthir abdicated and retired to the forest along with his brothers, placing Parikshit, Arjuna's grandson, on the throne. So even after the Bharata war ended, there were the troubles did not seem to subside. Okay, the Yadava dynasty of Dwarka was on a decline. Arjuna was called to occupy the throne, but Arjuna himself was defeated. So the people and the followers of Arjuna, they came back with Arjuna to Hastinapur. Parikshit, the son of Arjuna, was installed on the throne. Arjuna's grandson rather was installed on the throne. Okay. The accession of Parikshit marks the beginning of the Kali Yuga, and the Dwapar age is said to have closed with the Bharata war. Okay, so Kali Yuga is supposed to have started after the end of the Mahabharata war. The dynasties of the Kali age in the Puranas began with the accession of Parikshit. Okay, now since there was a new age, there was a new epoch. Okay, there were multiple dynasties that were wiped clean in the great war of the Bharatas. Okay, so after the end of the great war and the beginning of the Kali Yuga, Parikshit was on the throne of Indraprasth. Okay, now like I said, this natural cosmic order that we call as dharma or the Arya dharma is supposed to go on. These things will not stop. Also, although the age might have changed. Okay, so the internal struggles will continue. New nations, new tribes would come up in their place. But again, remember the larger umbrella of Arya dharma, okay, still stands, and beneath which all these things are continuing. Okay, so all the dynasties of the Kali age in the Puranas begin with Parikshit. He is supposed to have been the progenitor of all the dynasties that start in the Kali age. Okay. And now there have been efforts, okay, there are people who would say that if indeed the great war of the Bharatas is not totally and absolutely fiction, if indeed there is some degree of truth, okay, why exactly wasn't it mentioned in the Rig Samhita that we generally call it as Rigved? Why wasn't exactly is mentioned? Okay, now this is something that is used as a weapon to attack our civilization, to keep us away from rightfully claiming our identity. That is, since there is no coherence and since there are multiple disagreements between what has been mentioned in the Puranas and what has been mentioned in the Rig Samhita, we cannot concede absolutely that there is some degree of truth as well in the Puranas. Okay. Now, my answer to this will be slightly different. Okay. Now, people who are watching this video, I want you guys to go back to their scriptures. The people who are questioning, go back to their scriptures and, you know, pose the same questions to them as well. Find out discrepancies between the Old Testament and the New Testament and all their religious scriptures, if indeed there is some religious scriptures. Okay, because all their religious scriptures is still 1 millennia after what these things have happened. All right, but that is no reason for us, to, I would say, there is no reason for us to hold any grudge towards these monotheistic traditions. If there are people who abide by these rules, it's their choice. If they want to practice certain faith, it's their choice. But they don't get to tell us that our faith is all fiction and superstition. Then, if they do so, we are also entitled to question the foundations of their faith as well. All right. So all there is on page number 317, R.C. Majumdar claims it is worthy of note that even the Smriti texts quote verses defining Aryavart or the land of Aryans as coextensive with the northern part of Bharat. Okay, so all these texts, they mention a place called Aryavart, that is land of the Aryas, and that is pretty much, coincides and congruent with northern Bharat. Okay, so we should not be, under this impression that only if the Western scholarship validates that we are the original. We are the descendants of the original Aryanhood, then and only then we will adopt that identity. It is clearly mentioned in our Smriti texts, the word Aryavarta, it means the land of the Aryas. Let them come up with their primary sources as old as our Smritis and as old as our Vedic literature, okay, with any literary proof of them being called Aryans in first person, or if there is a reference to their land as Aryavart or the land of the Aryans. Let's see if there is somebody from the West watching this video, and if you are in possession, probably you can guide us to that source. Okay, you can feel free to comment the links to that source, and we can take that conversation forward. Okay. Next up is the Rakshasas were aborigines who were hostile to the Brahmanas, while the Vanaras, another aboriginal tribe, were allied to the Brahmanas. Again, so there is significant confusion. I wouldn't say confusion, but there is significant lack of information regarding the definition of certain people. Okay, now these are titles. Those titles go by the name of Asuras, Danavas, Daityas, and Rakshasas. If indeed all of them meant the same things, that is devil, okay, what is the rationale behind coming up with different words? Were they just looking for synonyms? That cannot be an explanation for coming up with different words. Okay, now these words or these titles in no way means something that is devil. I have cleared this sufficiently in one of my previous videos that Asura was a title that was even given to gods in the times of the Rig Samhita. Okay, so nowhere does it mention that Asura is somebody who is supposed to be a bad person. Again, that is an appeal to your reason. How exactly in the contemporary world we have come to believe that Asura is somebody who is bad person. Okay, and if you realize that the meaning that was told to you is false, who is to blame for such, malicious action? All right, so there is no significant clarity over what these titles meant. Okay, so we cannot simply assume out of convenience that these titles must have meant somebody who is, uncultured, savage, or a, barbaric tribe. Okay, we would have to give them the benefit of doubt. And this is again one of the reasons that the Westerners use to propagate this theory of Aryan migration. Okay, that the original inhabitants were the Asuras, Danavas, Daityas, Dasas, Dasyus, and the Rakshasas, whereas the Aryans were the cultured and the civilized people who came from outside, and it is only after their arrival that these people uh, you know came about to become civilized. Okay, I would entirely leave it upon you. If you are very much convinced by the Western scholars and their sources, I would not blame you. I would blame your school and our education system. Okay, up to a certain extent I would also blame you, because after a certain age it is upon you to discover the real history of your people. You cannot simply depend on the sources that the West has provided us with. Okay, do your own due diligence, find out who exactly are you. Even certain Aryan kings were termed Danavas and Asuras due to their evil character. Okay, again, so there is significant confusion, there is significant absence of proper explanation. The Pandyas, Cholas, and the Kerala dynasties in the south claimed descent from the new Luna dynasty. Okay, the Aryans extended their sway and colonized fresh lands, not by conquest alone, but with the aid of big armies. The colonization was also affected by small bands of adventurous Brahmanas and Kshatriyas from different Aryan kingdoms who went to new countries and, after clearing the jungles and making the tracts habitable, set up hermitages and residences over there. Now, there is also some explanation given for, let's say, um, you know, I would not want to use the word colonization, because then you will misinterpret and equate it with the colonization of the white person, colonization of the Christians. Okay, but yes, both the Varnas. Okay, still I would say there is no clear explanation for the Varnas, but it is mentioned over here that the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. Okay, they were the ones who were the adventurers. They were the ones who, there was a, I would say there has to have been some mutual understanding between both of them. Otherwise, without deriving mutual benefit from both the sides, they wouldn't function as single unity. But those were the ones who went from places to places, cleared the jungles, set up hermitages to set over there, and that is how the Arya Dharma. Okay, that the people of this land were enlightened, and the Arya Dharma was developed. Okay, the territories surrounding the Arya occupied Madhya Desha, the Vindhyas and the Vidarbhas, were colonized in this fashion. Okay, this expansion of Aryan culture in the south was a result of the hearty cooperation of the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas in carrying the banner of Aryanization. This is something that R.C. Majumdar mentions on page number 319, and like I have also put forward my position that there has to have been some mutual give and take between the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, since they were the ones who were carrying this banner of the Aryan hood. Okay, Agastya, the pioneer among the rishis to erect a hermitage in the Transvindhyan regions, preceded Rama by generations, but he paved the way for later adventurers. Okay, now here is something that I have profound disagreement with what is mentioned in the Puranas and the conclusions that R.C. Majumdar himself reaches. Okay, there is something that is very organic to this land of Bharat, the way we think, the way we live. Okay, our thinking patterns. Okay, now who's to say? Okay, again, this is hypothetical. I am going out on a tangent, and these are imaginations and speculations. Okay, but it is worth a thought. Okay, think about this. Instead of the Arya Dharma having developed in the northern parts of Bharat and then spreading downwards and westwards and eastwards and the southwards, who's to say that there was, if not same, similar Arya Dharma had come up in the south as well? Okay, this is again a speculation and hypothesis. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. If you know better, you can use the comment section of this video and come up with comments. All right. Maybe, maybe not. The contribution of the Yadavas in carrying the banner of Aryan culture over large tracts of land in the southwest and in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Malwa, and the Deccan, which came under their occupation, needs special mention. Okay. Now here is where there is even if you still believe in the Aryan migration theory, here is where the end would come. Okay. King Rama, he was the brand ambassador of the Arya Dharma. Krishna, he was the brand ambassador of the Arya Dharma. Yadavas and all the dynasties thenceforth, okay, carried the banner of Aryanhood. All the successive Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, all of them carried the banner of Aryanhood. Okay. And Aryanhood is basically the way of life as we see today. All right. The way we live, the way we think. So if indeed this theory of Aryan migration was true, let's assume for the sake of argument that these people, Aryans, they came from, the European continent because, their ego has to be massaged. That no, the epitome of human development, that is Aryanhood. There is some contribution that Europeans also made into that identity, that is the Aryanhood. Let's assume, okay. Now do you think, looking at the way of life, looking at the culture that these European countries have, is there some proximity between the culture and the way of life that Bharat has and the culture and the way of life that Europe has? If there isn't, how do you explain the survival of Aryanhood in the Bharat subcontinent, but complete annihilation, decimation, and extinction from the so-called and assumed the homeland of Aryans, that is Europe? Something for you to think. Do your own due diligence. I'm not going to sit in judgment over here. I'm not a historian or a trained historic scholar. I'm simply somebody who is raising questions. Okay. That's all for this episode of Ancient History of Bharat. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.